All right, hello everybody. This is Mr. Gilmore. I wanted to just take a moment to go through some basic graphing with you guys and how we'll be doing that graphing here in class. This applies to my physical science course, but this also applies to many other courses at OVCA. We do a lot of graphing with different documents. So I've gone to a website that just gives a simple set of statistics, and I'm going to take a portion of this data and I'll show you guys how to put this data into a graph in several different ways. So what we're looking at is just fish counts in the Gulf of Maine. So these are different areas that are included in the Gulf of Maine, and then the number of fish they counted and the year that that fish count was done. So very easy, simple set of data. I'm going to start with what I think is probably the easiest way to get a graph created. And then once you create that graph, you can just copy and paste it into your document. So we're just going to work with Excel first, and then I'm going to show you guys how to go from Microsoft Word and make a chart that way. So I'm going to select all this data. Well, actually, let's just select the first 20 rows. So just on my screen, I've just selected with my mouse, and I'm going to hit Control C to make a copy of that data. And now I'm going to open up a blank Excel workbook. You guys, everyone that's in this school should have access to Excel. You get access to the Microsoft products through your email address. So all you need is your school email address. If you don't already have that, you can go download that onto your computer. Now that I'm on this workbook, I'm just going to go ahead and start on the top left cell, the very first cell here, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste that data into Excel. Now this puts all my data and kind of organizes it for me. But this doesn't give me a graph yet, so I'll have to do a couple more steps to get to a chart or graph. I'm going to clean up this data myself a little bit. This section, if you noticed where I got it from, this was labeling the rows. Well, we don't need that because we already have rows over here. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this entire column. All right, so this is years. Let's see, we've got that. All right, I like that. That looks good. I like to, anytime I'm looking at data, I like to go ahead and format it as a table. So it gets these headers right. So I select all that data. I'm going to format it as a table, and until it does have headers. Headers are the names of the columns at the top. Alright, so now I've got my data set up. Now, this is probably more than we're ever going to deal with in a science class. In fact, in a science class, and I know in physical science, I don't think you ever get more than 4 different variables. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some of this out. I'm going to get rid of from G over. There we go. Now this is a much more manageable set of data. This would even be large for one of our science classes. So we don't usually deal with data quite this large, but this will give us something to work with. Get rid of that row right there. So now I've got my data. And in my science class and in the other science classes, you won't have to go find your own data and do like what I just did where I kind of trimmed it down. You'll have a specific set of data. So there's nothing to add or remove, just that's what you're going to be working with. Anytime you're organizing data like this, you're going to have a name for your data, so what that pool of data represents. So this is the eastern coast shelf, like this is the continental slope, central Gulf of Maine, so we know which data we're looking at for where. Now, the reason why I wanted to start in Excel is this really is the easiest method. So once all your data is set up, just go ahead and select all your data again, and now we're going to go up to the top and go to Insert, and we're going to insert a line area or a line chart. I prefer in my science classes most of the time a line chart is going to be the best way to represent the data we're looking at because we're usually looking at a progression over time. There's other ways that you can create other types of charts with the same data, but for the most part, at least speaking for physical science, you're always going to want to use a line chart. So I'm going to insert a line chart. And there's a couple of different ways we can choose it. We can choose to put the line with markers. I know for my class this doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and just do a standard line chart. Alright, and then let's look. Okay, we're almost done. And I see a problem. Where are we at? What's this number going on here? Year. Okay. Let's do that again. I'm going to go ahead and delete this chart. I made a mistake, and it's good that I made that because you guys might make the same mistake. So let's just delete that. I selected the year. Now the year is actually not collected data, right? The year is actually what should be on the x-axis. So the year just shows us how the data changes over time. So in fact, I'm just going to select this part. This is the data I want. And I do need to select those headers as well. There we go. Now I'm going to do insert line chart. There we go. That looks good. Okay, so done, almost. You just have to select the right data and then tell Excel to make it a chart and it'll do it for you. We do have to know a little bit about how to use this to modify this once it's made. By default, these don't give us our titles for our X and Y axis. And I need that from you guys. So that's really important. And also we can change it to where our x-axis has the actual years. So our fish counts are good, right? These are our counts on the y-axis. On the x-axis, it's just giving us columns, or I'm sorry, our rows. So our 1 through 20. So we would know that 21, or right here, would be 1982. So we need to make some changes here. So let's go ahead and modify this chart. Once you click on your chart to start modifying it, you can hit the plus to add things. I'm going to add axis titles first, because that's, in my class, that's always required. If I don't know what the numbers mean, it's not a good chart. So this over here on the y-axis, this was number of fish. Or I could say fish count or something like that. And then on the x-axis, we've got year. Alright, so once you get to this point where you've got your data selected, but I still have these somewhat annoying numbers down here on the bottom that aren't showing me the year that I want to show. Well, you can select that group of data, or that number range that's given you. Go ahead and grab it. And then when you right click, then you can select data. So I want to represent different than 1 through 20. I want to represent the actual years that this data is from. So I'm going to hit select data, edit, and now I'm going to select the range. And I'm going to grab right here. This is my range of data. And now when I hit OK, I need to make the graph a little bit bigger. But now we have all of our data for the number of fish. I've got my X and Y axis labels. I've got a label down here on my X which shows each individual year, right? That's what that's telling me. And I can look. I'm not showing like the actual like points of data. We just know that's where the graph changes, right? So right here's a point of data, right here's a point of data, wherever that angle is changing. I could change, there's a couple of different ways to represent this same data. So like if we were to again grab our data set and instead we were to do a different kind of graph, like let's do one where we do see the points. Move it down here. Now I haven't changed the number line at the bottom yet or the axis labels, but you can see how, you know, it's the same type of graph, you just get a little bit more information. In my class and probably most of your science classes, we won't care whether you put the data points or not as long as the data is structured correctly. So that's how you do this in Excel. Let me now show you, let's say you're actually in a Word document, right? You're in one of our lab reports. So this is a generic lab report. And then on number 4, that's where Mr. Gilmore wants you to put in a graph. So you say, okay, how do I put a graph into my lab report? Go up to Insert, and you're going to insert a chart. I use the terms graph and chart interchangeably. For Microsoft products, it's a chart. So we're going to go find a chart. Again, we want to do a line chart for most of the time. So here's my line chart, and then I'm going to hit OK. And there we go. Now, this is how it's different if you do it in Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word will let you insert the chart, but it has to deal with the data in Excel. Excel is the only thing that can deal with data. So it's going to open up this little window that's where your data is located for this Word document. So here's the representation in our Word document, and the data is here in Excel. So now I need to edit this to get the data to match. So I'm going to do kind of the same thing I did before. Now, this time, instead of starting with the data and then fitting a chart to it, I'm going to start with a chart and fit data to it to make the data represented correctly. So I'm going to go back and look at my data that I want to pull from this website. And it's probably going to be easier if I just go ahead and start with everything, and then we'll edit it down from there. So let's go ahead and hit, I guess we'll do 20 rows again. So let's go to row 20, grab all that, I'm going to come up here, actually going to put it, we'll start right here with the data. So let's delete that. Alright, now this is way too huge. So we need to get rid of that. This information right here is what's going to be in your categories. In your categories, this is your x-axis. So this is whatever's going on your x-axis, which is the bottom of your chart. Alright, so the rest of this looks pretty good. We got too much data though, so let's go, I think we just went to here. So I'm going to get rid of the rest of this so that chart's not too crowded. There we go. Okay, so now I've got my labels up here. These are my different types of data. So in a lab experiment, what you might see is like trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, trial 4. Maybe 4 different times we test a chemical, or 4 different times we do an experiment. Each of those trials would then be represented here. Let's get rid of 1963 since it has no data. Oh, the data must have been off, but oh well. Okay, that cleans it up a bit. So this would be like trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, trial 4, trial 5. And then here's the results for each of those trials. Okay, so now I've got my data put in here. Now I can close this out. There's my chart. So now my data is collected inside my Microsoft Word document. Now this is linked to Excel, but now I have the fish population data represented here. I think we got an extra category here that we didn't have before. I'm still going to need chart title and axis labels. I require that on all my graphs, and Microsoft Word doesn't do that or Excel do that by default. So you guys will still have to do this extra step I'm going to show you. So let's give it a chart title first. I'm just going to double click on that. And we're going to call this Fish Counts by Year in the Gulf of Maine. Kind of a long title, but it's kind of a weird chart to look at. So then we need to also give ourselves axis titles. This plus sign is how you add elements to your chart. That's how you make it more fancy. All right, so I'm going to add axis titles. Once I click that checkbox, they pop over here. I'm just going to double click over here to give them titles. So this is fish count, so number of fish, and this is by year. There we go. And that is an A+ good graph at OVCA or in OVCA science classes. If you can get your graph and your data represented like this, that's really what we look for. We look for all these different elements. We've got a key that tells us what these different trials or these different experimental pathways represent. We've got our labels. This is really, I mean, I'm always going to ding you guys on this, because if you just have like this number 0 through 160, 0 through 160 what? Like, yeah, the title kind of tells me, but you really need a label specifically representing what that number represents. So you always want to make sure and add those. All right, we are almost done. That's how you do that in Microsoft Word or through Microsoft Excel. Now I'm going to switch gears for just a minute, and I want to show you guys how to do this in Google Docs. Everyone in this school does have access to Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, but if for any reason you're unable to access those, Google is always a good backup because it can do the same thing. So I'm going to go to Google Docs. Open this up. We've got a blank. Just assume this is a lab assignment. Usually it's about like number 4 or number 5 where I ask you to put in your graph. So just like what we did with the Word document. Now, just like in Microsoft Word, you also go to Insert, and we're going to insert a chart, and we want a line chart. So Insert, Chart, Line Chart for your type of chart. All right, and just like what happened with Microsoft Word, we've got this just generalized chart popped up, and now we need to edit it. We need to get the data in there correctly. This is the part that's a little bit different. Functionally, it's still kind of the same, but the buttons you click are a little bit different. So in Google Docs, we've got this link over here to link this chart to the data file. So I'm going to go to open source, and this opens the data for this chart. There we go. New window popped up. Here's my chart. I don't know why, but it's always kind of in the way. And then here's where my data is. So the data that makes this chart is located here. Just like before, I think in Microsoft Word or in Excel it was called categories. It's defaulted Team 1, Team 2. This is what's on your x-axis. So from my data, let's see, let's go ahead and we'll just grab all the raw data again from here, and we're going to have to edit it down because it's more than we need. But let's go right here. Right, that's going to freak it out because that's a lot of data. It'll take a minute. It'll try and figure it out and then update it. And then we're going to cut it down from here, recognizing that column A, this first one, is our categories. So I'm actually going to delete that. There we go. Now it's starting to fit in years. Now the reason why this is kind of freaking out, and it's only showing part of it, is that Google is only set up to do 2 categories by default. So if we want to have 4 or 5 different columns of data, I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to get rid of this other stuff that we haven't been using so far. Just delete columns. There we go. All right, but I think we do want to use all this data. So now, edit chart. And this is asking me, like, what are my different series of data. So right now I have the series for the Bay of Fundy and the series for Brown Bank. That's this column right here. But I want to add in these other 3. So we just do add series, and here they're already setting up. So we're going to add the Central Gulf of Maine. And if you don't see it automatically listed, I want to do these other 2 as well. You can hit right here, select the data range. And that's the data range. That's just that entire column. And then select another data range. This one right here. Alright, so now I've got all of my different series of information in here. It's already, see, it's got a key created for 5 different series of information. This one actually, so this is doing something different. Rather than displaying every single year that's there, it's just giving me a range for the years. So it goes, here's 1980, it goes beyond a little bit past that. That's fine too. Still a decent way of representing data, a little bit less accurate, but still good for representing this kind of stuff. So now, if I go back and look at my Word document, oh wait, none of that stuff I did is changed. That's because you got to hit this little link, and that's because this is web-based. There's a little bit of an extra step. So now when I hit link, oops, there we go, update. There we go. Now it's updated. Now I'm still missing a little bit on here. What am I missing? I've got my data. Oh, no labels. No labels. There's a key, but we need labels for this, and we need it still says points scored for the title. So let's go back here. Let's keep on customizing it. So for chart and axis titles, chart title, point score, no. This is fish count in the Gulf of Maine. Okay, and then what else we need? We need horizontal axis title. Horizontal horizon, that's the one that goes across, so that's years. And vertical axis title, that's up and down. That's the number of fish, so fish count. There we go. All right, let's see how it is now. Okay, there we go. Now I've got my data represented, I've got fish count, I've got my axis labels, I've got a title for my graph, and I've got my key. So now again, let's go back. Oh, it's not updated. Hit update. There we go. So now my data is represented in the graph. Didn't take too long, about 20 minutes, but in 20 minutes, if you guys are able to watch this video, I've shown you how to make a chart or a graph, it's called a chart in these programs, of the different information or of the information that's provided in different ways. You can do it in Microsoft Word, you can do it in Excel, and you can also do it on the Google suite of Google apps. So you can use Google Sheets or Google Docs. If you guys are in my class and you have any questions, you can send me an email at pgilmore@okvirtual.org. Or if you see this video for one of your other science teachers, you can just email your science teacher if you have any specific questions. We will be making graphs quite a bit in our science classes at OVCA, so I want to make sure that everyone is ready and willing to do this. And you may want to keep a link for this video, and you might find that you need to watch this video in about 2 months. So we'll keep this video up for quite a while so you can still access it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye.